Let me ask you something to kick things off today. And I want you to sit with it for a second before you answer. Who is the one person in your professional life right now that you care about the most, but haven't talked to in the past couple months? Take a second and really chew on that. You probably have somebody specific in mind, a mentor who helped shape who you are at work, a colleague who really gets you, and the one who you used to have real conversations with, who somehow dropped off the radar, a direct report that you genuinely like, but whose one-on-ones have become 15-minute agenda rundowns with no actual conversation happening, a collaborator who used to send you occasional messages, but now always gets the, yeah, I've been meaning to respond to that treatment until you just forget about it entirely. Yeah, we've all got at least one of those. And here's what I want to talk about today: the quiet neglect of our most important existing relationships and what happens to those relationships and to us when we let that neglect go on for too long. This is not an episode about building your network or meeting new people. We covered that a few weeks ago in episode 14. This is about the people who are already in your life, the ones that you've already invested time and energy in, the ones that already matter, and how to go deeper with those people without setting your hair on fire while you do it. Because here's what I've come to believe. For most of us, the answer to a more meaningful professional life isn't more relationships. It's better ones. And the raw material for better ones is already sitting right in front of us, just waiting for us to actually show up. So let's start by talking about why this happens, because I don't think that most people neglect relationships that matter to them either intentionally or out of indifference. It's usually a set of really human patterns that most of us just never stop to examine. The first one I call the performance assumption. When a relationship feels solid, when there's genuine history and goodwill between two people, we treat it like it will hold indefinitely on its own, almost like equipment that doesn't need maintenance because it's always just been there. And this is a mistake because relationships are living things. They need input to stay alive. The solid ones have a little more runway before they start to fray, but they do all fray eventually without any investment. The second pattern is the urgency trap. Our attention flows toward the loudest, most pressing things. And the relationships that are just going fine don't send up flares. They just wait quietly while we tell ourselves that we'll invest in them when things slow down. And I think that most of us by now really know that things just don't slow down. We just find new, urgent, shiny things to fill in that empty space. And the third pattern, this one is subtle, and I think it's the most insidious. It's what I call the drift toward performance. Over time, some relationships slip from a genuine connection into a kind of professional routine. You and a colleague just stop really talking and start just operating. Every interaction between the two of you is efficient and task focused. And somewhere along the way, you've forgotten what it felt like to actually talk to the person. You know their opinions on the work or the project, but you've lost track of their actual life. And neither of you has said anything about it because nothing has technically gone wrong. Your relationship has just gone quiet. Here's why these patterns matter. They're all fixable, and not one of them requires you to have failed the relationship. They just require you to notice what has happened and make a different choice going forward. Before we get into the practical stuff, I want to spend a few minutes on what we actually mean when we talk about depth in a relationship. Because deepen your relationships can sound abstract in a way that makes it hard to act on. Depth isn't about time. You can spend a lot of time with someone and still have a shallow relationship. Depth is about the quality and honesty of what happens when you're together. It's about whether both people feel genuinely known, not just professionally useful. when there's enough trust to say something real when something real needs to be said, when the relationship would survive a change in context. Many professional relationships are entirely function dependent. They exist because of a shared project or a shared role. If you remove the function, the relationship just disappears. And those relationships are the most fragile. They don't hold up under pressure because there's nothing real underneath of them to hold on to. Deeper relationships have something underneath of the function, a genuine liking, a shared history of honesty, the sense that this person knows you, not just your work output. And here's the good news. Building that depth doesn't require a massive time investment. It mostly requires intention. Small, consistent, genuine moves over time compound into something real and something lasting. Okay, so now the practical stuff. The first practical principle is to move from transactional to relational. Most professional interactions default to the transactional mode. Here's the agenda, here's what we need, here's the output, and you move on. I'm not anti-efficiency, but when every single conversation with a person is purely about the work, then the work becomes the entire relationship. And work-only relationships are fragile. Moving toward a relational relationship doesn't mean ignoring the work. It means making space, even briefly, for the person behind the work. And this can look really small. Things like starting off a meeting with a genuine question and actually waiting for the answer before moving on to the topic rather than treating it as a formality. Noticing when someone seems off and just saying so, or following up on something personal that they mentioned a few weeks back. These are all small deposits that accumulate into trust over time. There's a concept in relational research called turning toward. When someone makes a bid for a connection, even a small one, the people in strong relationships turn toward that bid. A bid might be something as simple as someone mentioning that they had a bad week or going through a rough patch, or sharing something small about their personal life. Turning toward means actually responding and engaging, noticing. Research from Dr. John Gottman found that couples, romantic couples, who stayed together turned toward each other's bids about 86% of the time. And those couples that didn't make it only did so about 33% of the time. That same principle translates directly to professional relationships. The people whose work relationships run deep aren't doing anything heroic. They're just consistently paying attention to the small moments that most people miss. So here's the exercise. In your next 3 interactions with someone that you care about at work, resist the pull to go straight to the agenda. Give the relationship 2 miserable minutes before the work gets the 2 full hours. See what that does over time. Here's another question for you to chew on. Is there a conversation that you have been avoiding with someone in your professional life? Something that needs to be said but hasn't been said? Or tension that's been sitting around unaddressed? If the answer is yes, you already know this relationship has a ceiling, because depth and unaddressed tension or unaddressed honesty can't coexist for long. One of them will eventually kill off the other. Deep relationships can hold hard conversations. They can absorb things like disagreement and feedback and tension without just collapsing. Shallow relationships simply can't. In shallow relationships, honest conversation feels too risky. So people stay in their comfort zone, and then the comfortable zone becomes the only zone. Building depth through honesty means 2 things. First, it means being willing to say the real thing when it needs to be said, naming the tension, or having the feedback conversation that you've been just sitting on. Acknowledging directly that the relationship has drifted and you'd like to change that. Second, and equally important, is to make yourself the kind of person that others feel safe being honest with. This is about how you receive honesty. When someone gives you hard feedback, do you respond with openness or do you get defensive? When someone tells you something that, let's face it, you just didn't want to hear, do you thank them or do you subtly just freeze them out? When someone believes that you can handle honesty, they'll invest more deeply because real vulnerability requires real safety. And real safety is built through repeated evidence that telling the truth doesn't damage things between the two of you. I want to share something that I think is one of the most underrated truths about what actually deepens relationships. Relationships are most powerfully built in moments of inconvenience. They're not built in the easy check ins when everything is fine. They're not built in the scheduled one on ones when the agenda is full. They're built in the moments when someone needs something and you show up without being asked. When a colleague is struggling and you make time even though your own plate is full. When you notice that someone has gone quiet, you reach out just because you care. These moments are worth 10 of the comfortable, low stakes interactions that happen when everything is running smoothly. And here's why. When you show up at a cost to yourself, you send a message that this relationship exists beyond its function, that the other person is not just a resource in your professional ecosystem, but an actual human being whose experience you care about. That kind of investment lands at a completely different level than a scheduled check-in. This applies to leaders who lead their teams in a specific way. The leaders who build genuine loyalty, not the managed, compliant kind, but the kind where people go above and beyond because they actually want to, are the ones who showed up for their people in the hard moments. The inconvenience is not the cost of the relationship. The inconvenience is the investment in the relationship. So let's address the burnout piece directly, because everything I have described today requires real energy, genuine attention, and honest conversation, showing up when it matters. None of that is passive, and you can't do it sustainably if you're already running on empty. The reason that most people let their most important existing relationships go shallow isn't because they don't care. It's that they've spread themselves so thin that by the time they get to relationships that matter most, there's just nothing real left to give. So this is a good starting point. An honest reflection on your relational capacity in any given week. Not what you wish was there, but what it is. Some weeks you have bandwidth for real depth. Other weeks you're just in survival mode. Knowing the difference between the two lets you make better decisions. In the weeks where you have capacity, invest it deliberately. Schedule the conversation that matters or block out time to give someone real attention. On the weeks when you just don't, be honest. A short, genuine message of, hey, I've been buried this week, but you've been on my mind. Let's chat next week is infinitely better than forcing some form of hollow interaction. And think about where your relational energy is currently leaking. Are there relationships that constantly suck out more from you than they give back? You're allowed to dial those back, but thoughtfully. The energy freed up can go directly back into the relationships that actually deserve it. One more practical piece: create rituals of connection. Standing monthly calls with people that matters, or recurring check-ins that just don't require scheduling from scratch every single time, or an annual habit of reaching out to the people who shaped your career. These rituals work because they remove the friction of staying close. The connection is already built into the schedule. It just happens. So let's bring this all together. The premise of today's episode was relatively simple. For most of us, the relationships that will make the biggest difference in our professional lives aren't the ones that we haven't built yet. They're the ones that we already have and haven't fully invested in. Those relationships are already there. The people are already there. The history is already there. The goodwill is already there. What's missing is the intention to go deeper and the energy management to sustain it. So here's a quick hit summary to tie this all back together again. Watch for the 3 patterns: the permanence assumption, the urgency trap, and the drift toward performance. Number 2, move from transactional to relational. Give the relationship the 2 minutes before the work gets the 2 hours. Number 3, have an honest conversation that you have been avoiding. Number 4 is to show up when it's inconvenient. That's where trust actually gets built. Number 5 is to manage your relational energy deliberately. And then number 6, to build rituals of connection. And finally, I'd like you to think about one relationship right now, today, that has gotten less real attention than it deserves. Reach out to that person, not with an agenda, but with honesty, with a, hey, I've been meaning to actually reach out and talk to you, but I keep not doing it. Let's change that. That sentence right there is not a small move. For the right relationship, it can be everything. The blog post for this episode is up at toby-talks.com. It goes a lot deeper into each of the principles and actually includes some practical ideas that you can put to work right away. Thanks for spending a few minutes with me today, and I'll see you next time on Toby Talks.